Hello to all of my YouTube subscribers out there. The video that you're about to watch for Fideos Secos is exactly the type of content you'll find on my member channel. Now we're posting brand new recipe videos every single week, and if you want access to all the member perks, you have to hit the join button. Don't see the button? I'll post a link in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to my kitchen, and thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to talk about pasta in the Mexican kitchen, and you may think there is no pasta in the Mexican kitchen, but I'm here to tell you that there is, and there's really classic dishes that are made from it. But it's this pasta that I have in front of me. It's called a fideo, and it is always in the dried form. And I'm going to show you how to make the second most popular version of fideos in the Mexican kitchen. This one is called a sopa seca de fideo, or a dry soup of fideos, and it's only seco or dry by comparison to the most common use for these fideos, and that is in sopa de fideos. That is a dish that every Mexican mother makes and every Mexican kid eats. It's just this rich, brothy, tomatoey soup that has these vermicelli noodles or fideos in it. Now, when you see pasta in the Mexican kitchen, you will see them doing something completely different than what you probably think about if you make pasta in the Italian style. You just dump these into salted boiling water, right? And you boil them, but that's not what we're going to do today. And in fact, if you go to look at how the Mexican kitchen produces rice, we're going to follow some of those same steps. So instead of just boiling rice, they fry the rice first. Instead of just boiling the fideos, in Mexico, they toast the fideos first. And usually they do that in a fair amount of oil in a skillet, just the way they would do rice. But I've got another way of doing it here. I'm spreading them on a baking sheet. I find this way easier. And then just spray them liberally with oil. I have this olive oil spray here. And you want to coat them nicely so that they will brown or toast evenly. And then I'm going to slide them into a 375-degree oven. And we're going to watch them, but it'll take someplace around 8 minutes or so for them to toast nicely. So I'm going to slide them in here and check my temperature there. That's what it is. I thought I would show you the package of what these are like when you go looking for them in the Mexican grocery store. Of course, you can just get dried vermicelli noodles in any grocery store pretty much, but these are in little coils, and they used to sell them in 10-ounce packages, and so that's what I wrote the recipe for, but this is a slightly smaller size, so you just have to kind of estimate what 10 ounces would be of those guys. So we'll get rid of over there, and we're going to start making the base of the sauce here. I'm going to heat up my large skillet. Now, you're going to need a 12-inch skillet to do this because unlike the Italian kitchen, you're going to put the toasted vermicelli directly in the sauce and cook it that way. Now, when you taste these noodles, you will be really surprised at I call it buoyancy that they have. They're not soft exactly like a boiled noodle in an Italian preparation, but they have this sort of little bounciness to them that I just think is absolutely wonderful. So this dish is a dish that brings to people's minds this sort of luscious preparation of tomatoes and cream and cheese and all the good stuff, topped with some avocado, oftentimes some chorizo sausage maybe goes on there, and a handful of cilantro leaves. But I'm going to show you a slightly different preparation that's going to be satisfying the same way, but it's going to take us down a slightly different path. This one's going to be focused on the flavor of some of the mushrooms here. So I'm going to grab my knife here and we'll talk about these mushrooms. I have oyster mushrooms, and you usually just break them apart. Sometimes they'll come all broken apart. There is a base that we will want to kind of get off of these at the bottom. It's not very tough. It's not like the stems of shiitake mushrooms. But I want to cut these crosswise into about 1/4-inch pieces. And that way they'll work nicely with the strings of the vermicelli noodles. So we'll cut those guys up. And then we want to saute these with an onion. So I have my onion already cleaned of the exterior. I'm not going to use the basis of them for this preparation, but you could if you wanted to. You would just cut them really thin. And so for these guys, I'm going to make sure that I've got the base off of that and then just cut crosswise here. And my pan now is over a kind of medium-high heat, which is where I want it to be. And we're going to toss everything in there and keep it moving in the pan. Again, I'm doing 1/4-inch here until these onions start to brown. Okay, so in we'll go enough oil to coat the bottom of this pan nicely. I'm using, by the way, and you see me use this all the time, Baja Precious olive oil. So these are olives that are grown in Baja. It's an area that's great for growing olives, and this is a combination of Mission and Nevadillo olives. Mission were brought there back in the 1500s, and Nevadillo slightly after that. But I got enough oil in here to coat the bottom of the pan so liberally. It'll take about 3 tablespoons to do that. So we'll put all of this good stuff in here. And just toss it until or stir it. A lot of times when I'm working with a different kind of skillet than this straight-sided cast iron one, I'll just toss it around in the pan. But you can't do that very well with this kind of a skillet. So we'll have to stir it. But while this is starting to cook now, I'm going to prepare the sauce base and then another one of the chilies that's going to go in here. So I have these pasilla chilies. Now, if you're confused sometimes when you go to the grocery store and you see a chili that does not look like this one, called a pasilla, it is probably an ancho chili. Because in some parts of Mexico, they call the ancho chili a pasilla. But this one they will call a pasilla negro, okay? But it's the long, black-looking one. And for this preparation, I want to cut it into little strips. Now, this takes a fair amount of pressure to cut through the chili skins. And I usually do this. Some people like to do this with scissors, but I actually find that harder to do. So I just kind of put some body weight into it. And you can see that I didn't open these up and take the seeds or anything out of them. There we go with that. Because I can just toss it and get most of the seeds out of it. I've got one more to do here. So you're using a lot of pressure, so you want to make sure you're always keeping your non-dominant hand with the fingers curved under, like that. Okay. Now we're going to toss it up like this and let the seeds fall out. And then those are going to go into the skillet once we see that the onions are browning nicely. Okay. You see that? See how easy that is? And it goes so much faster for me. And now we're going to make the sauce base for this. And instead of working with fresh tomatoes for all of this, especially because I'm right now in the dead middle of winter here in Chicago. And yes, we do have some good hothouse tomatoes grown here, and I've touted them a number of times. But I find more consistency in a can of fire roasted tomatoes. So I'm going to make the base of this sauce. We're going to use 2 cans. One, and these are diced. One will go in here whole and the other, or the pieces, and one will go in a puree form. So to this, I'm going to add our second chili. So the second chili here is chipotle, and I really like the flavor of the canned chipotle here, and a couple of them would be nice, and you can always adjust the quantity that you put in of these two. I'm going to put just a spoonful of that juice, and that first one was so small. If there's another small one or a piece of a small one, then I'm going to get that in there. There we go. Okay, now I am going to put let's take a look at those fideos too. I'm going to make a puree out of that, but I'll come back to it again in a second. So let's see what these fideos look like in here. I think they're just about ready. Okay, so I'll show these to you, but I'm going to leave them in for 2 more minutes. This is what we want them to look like, is the brown of that all the way through there. So I'll slide them back in for a couple more minutes. And then we've got some browning now starting on these onions. So this is the moment then that I will add the pasilla chili to it. And by the way, if you can't find the pasilla chilies, you could just add more chipotle to it. I just love what they add to this dish though, so that's why I've suggested that you put them into this dish. Or you could use ancho chilies for this as well. So if you think this looks like a great dish and you can't find the pasilla chilies, then don't get frustrated. And we're going to let those toast in the oil for a couple of minutes. They'll become very aromatic. You'll smell them when they're ready. And this is going to give us the moment to make our puree out of this. Of course, the fire roasted tomatoes would be my choice for this rather than just the regular canned diced tomatoes, because they'll have a slightly smoky flavor. It's richer, it's more complex, and so I tend to rely on those a lot. Let's look over here at these pasilla chilies now. I'm getting a really beautiful toasted chili aroma going. Gorgeous. And I will say that they are about ready. So now's the moment to put in this tomato puree. And we'll put in at the same time the second can of the fire roasted tomatoes. And I am putting them in. I didn't drain either one of these guys at all. Stir that as it sort of heats up. Now we're looking for a really juicy mixture here, because this is going to be the mixture that we simmer the pasta in. So we're going to add to it some chicken broth. We're going to let this come to a simmer while we chop some cilantro here. So I've got some beautiful fresh cilantro, and I need about a half a cup or so of the chopped, and I'm going to chop it like I always do with the stems all together, just bunching it up, and then working crosswise like this, making a very thin slice. And then we'll just add that too. I think this will give us about a half a cup. A lot of people like to make this dish with epazote. So if you live near a Mexican grocery store that carries epazote, you won't usually find it in the average grocery store. But if you live near one, you might want to put it in here at this point. They don't usually chop the leaves of the epazote. Just put them in whole. So we've got our cilantro in there. And then we need to taste this now because we want to have a very nicely seasoned base to simmer the fideos in. Okay, so I'm going to guess here that this is going to take about a teaspoon of salt because we don't have anything in here with salt. So let's just start with that and see what that gives us now. Now, if that was a soup, it would be just right. But I need to put just a little bit more of it in there. And let's take a look at these fideos. Ah, nice. So they're evenly toasted now. You can see how beautiful those guys are. We've got our sauce now seasoned and ready to take these fideos in. So we will just slide them in and nestle them down. They have to be completely covered with the sauce. And after about, I'd say about 3 or 4 minutes, they will soften enough that you can break these little coils apart. Okay, this is what the fideo seco should look like. Of course, I've got mushrooms in here, so it's a little different than the absolutely classic version of this dish. But I am going to put the cream in there now. A little bit more than a half a cup is what you're going to need here. I put half of it into the mix and just kind of let that mix in beautifully. Of course, it starts looking really luscious when you have that cream in there. And this would be either Mexican crema or creme fraiche, or you could use some heavy cream, but it won't be drizzleable on the top, so you would want to add it all in at once. Now, we're ready to do all the toppings on it, so I'm going to turn the temperature off here. This took us right at about 8 minutes total from the time I put the fideos in there. About 4 minutes for them to start to soften up and then break apart. And then about 4 minutes more. But you're going to just have to stand there and test it because your fideos may be a little bit different, a little thicker, a little thinner than the ones that I have here. So I'm going to take a portion of the fideos. This stuff makes a great main course, and then you might want to put some chorizo sausage on top of it, or I actually like to serve it with a piece of grilled fish too. I mean, there's lots of different options with this, but let's just say you were going to do it more like a pasta course as a first or second course in a meal. Then I have the goat cheese that I'm going to put on here. Well, let's first drizzle it with a little bit of cream. So I have more of this crema left. It's a little too thick for me to use as a drizzle. So I'm just going to stir just a tiny bit of water into it to soften it up. If you had sour cream that you wanted to drizzle on top, you can't really put it into the pasta dish because it will curdle in the pasta dish. But maybe you want to, if you've got the creme fraiche you're working with, you could do that. Just soften it up so that you can drizzle a little bit more of it on the top. Now, some people in the classic version will put avocado on it, and that would certainly be welcome on this one if you want to do that. What I'm going to put on is goat cheese crumbles here because I love that with the mushrooms, the sprinkling of the goat cheese. And then for me, I absolutely love putting a whole handful of cilantro leaves over the top. Just scatter them on like that. And then though I didn't call for it in this recipe, if you have some of the Mexican grating cheese, it would always be welcome on here, something like the cotija. And in my Whole Foods market near my house, they have started carrying this already grated stuff. It actually tastes more like Parmesan than it does real cotija. And there you have it. My version of fideos secos, it will satisfy a crowd. I tell you, this is one of my favorite things. And in central Mexico, where fideos secos is a very popular dish, all you have to do is mention those words and people's mouths start watering and they'll go, oh, that creamy pasta. Maybe they say chorizo, maybe they say avocado, but it's always that creamy tomatoey pasta with cheese. And I think we all love that, don't we? So I encourage you to make this. It's a very easy recipe to do and you can serve a crowd with it. Enjoy your time in the kitchen and enjoy fideos secos.